Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you for inviting me to Twickenham St Mary's on a lovely day, a lovely February day. Thank you to Michael Hobson as well for making a recommendation to Rosalind about my work after coming to my exhibition that I held in December about uncovering the life histories of Black British champions in cycling, which was to do with race equality and bringing to the fore the stories of the marginalised, which is the work that I'm interested in, bringing to fore the stories of the marginalised against the dominant discourses that we see in education. So this is the title that I've got for you today, Transforming the Primary School National Curriculum for History, the history aims and contents to develop teaching and learning about race equality. It's a bit about me. I'm a former primary school teacher. I began teaching in around 1999. I finished in a primary school in about 2013. I taught in four or five primary schools in London, in Berkshire, in West Sussex, in Surrey. I'm a former deputy head teacher, and my role as a deputy was really to do with managing the curriculum, developing a broad and balanced curriculum for the children, and at the same time as working as a primary school teacher, I did my Masters of Arts in Education on the absence of black male primary school teachers in a profession, an observation that I saw during my time as a primary school teacher. So that's something that I wanted to explore as to why undergraduate black males did not choose teaching as a potential career route, and there was lots of discourses around that at the time, still is today. And my doctorate in education, I completed that about 2 years ago now, was examining the experiences and perceptions of migration and settlement in Britain, and how that can assist teaching and learning in a Key Stage 2 history curriculum. So with my knowledge of the history curriculum, with my own personal background, I was sort of bringing both together to sort of do an exploration of that through a professional doctorate, and some of those elements I'm going to be talking about to you today. At the moment I'm working at Brighton as a senior lecturer in education. I'm training students to become teachers. I also work on quite a wide range of programmes, including the doctorate, the masters, the PGCE and the BA Honours Education programme. All right. So let's look at this this particular blog that I've got on the BERA website called Arresting Epistemic Violence, Decolonising the National Curriculum for History. And what you'll get from that particular blog is an examination of how the dominant discourses of mass migration and settlement in Britain are presented by the national curriculum. The national curriculum for Key Stage 2 children, that's children aged 7 to 11, okay, it stops at 1066, okay? So that means that where teachers are asked to teach children about how Britain, how Britain has become Britain, how a national identity has been forged for its people, you only hear about the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, all right? At Key Stage 3, so when you go to secondary school, years 7 and 8, there's an opportunity to teach about mass migration, but it's non-statutory. Schools don't have to do it. So what that suggests is that when it comes to learning about the people who've come to Britain over the years, we only get a Eurocentric perspective, okay? And that needs to be challenged. If you're an academic, if you're a teacher, if you're of a minority ethnic group background, if you're not of a minority ethnic group background, if you want to teach more critically about history, those sorts of discourses, those narrow discourses need to be challenged. And this is what this particular blog does. It challenges that national curriculum, and it brings in the stories of the marginalised through critical multicultural education. So it doesn't dismiss those Eurocentric stories, okay? It keeps them there, but it juxtaposes them against other people's stories to get a more balanced view about mass migration for race equality. That's what race equality is all about, okay? About giving equal value to different experiences and different perspectives. That's the way that I see it. So that's what that blog does, okay? It's on the BERA website. If you want to read a bit about that, you can. But I'm going to be talking about some elements of that today as well. Okay, what are the aims of this lecture then? And there they are. So to arrest examples of Eurocentric discourses and epistemic violence. That term comes from Gayatori Spivak, okay, who's a critical theorist, and we'll be talking about what we mean by epistemic violence through the national curriculum. In fact, I've just given you an example of epistemic violence where you have a particular episode of mass migration being imposed upon the masses through the national curriculum. That's a form of epistemic violence where knowledge is being imposed upon us without looking at other examples of knowledge. Okay? So we're going to be exposing some examples of that, and we're going to be exposing the race inequalities through the critical theoretical lenses of whiteness and white privilege. Okay? And by doing this, we're going to be fostering approaches to teaching and learning about diversity, about race equality, through critical multicultural education. I'm going to be giving you a definition of critical multicultural education through a theorist called Banks. Okay? And hopefully this can empower trainee teachers, academics, sociologists, criminologists, through policies that you're working with to enact those aims and contexts through more transformative approaches or more transformative interpretations. All right? That's what I aim to do via this particular lecture. I want it to be quite interactive as well, so here's the first thing that I want you to do for me, okay? I want you to go to that Poll Everywhere website, okay? And it should be working. And I want you to choose which of the following persons and the legacies could be best used through the National Curriculum for History. All right, so we've all been to school, we've all experienced the National Curriculum for History, okay, in teaching and learning about race equality and the fundamental British values, two of them, of mutual respect and tolerance. So you see some images of some people. All right. Can you see that? Is that coming up for you? Excellent. Okay, so it's working. All right.
You can only vote for one.
You can only vote for one. Okay. I'm keeping it narrow. I'll give you a moment for that. Okay. Let's just leave it there then. So look, we've got a resounding. The first person at the top there is who? Nelson Mandela. Second one is Mauricio. The third one is.
I couldn't remember the third and the fourth one, and I.
Okay, so the third one is a guy called Paul Stevenson. Okay, yeah. Anyone know who Paul Stevenson is? That's going to be a significant talking point. No. Okay. The fourth one is Rosa Parks. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Rosa Parks.
All right. Okay. And the fifth person is Stephen Lawrence.
Yeah.
And the final person is Martin Luther King. I added him last night.
None of us.
So which of the following persons and the legacies could be best used through the national curriculum for teaching and learning about race equality and fundamental British values, i.e. mutual respect and tolerance? Resounding to Stephen Lawrence. Does anybody want to sort of discuss why they may have chosen Stephen Lawrence?
That's because he's British.
Because he's British? Okay.
I think a lot of history growing up and what we teach in schools is from an American or African point of view.
Yeah.
Not many people tend to tell you that the black people in Britain in 106 or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the angle of it.
Yeah. Okay, that's a strong view. That's a interesting view. Anybody else choose Stephen Lawrence and reason for that?
There was a racially motivated attack that he was murdered for.
Yeah. Because of the racially motivated attack that he was murdered for?
I chose it because I'm just steeped in policy recommendations of the Stephen Lawrence Inquiry Report. So I do it all the time. So it relates
Sure.
to policing and stuff. So I think, and also
Yeah.
because we are, the Home Office is doing an event, and I was just discussing it yesterday. So it's very fresh in my brain.
Yeah.
And I just think that because it is so important for
Yeah.
all the good reasons people have already said, I think it's really important. Yeah.
Okay, go on.
He's young,
He's young.
and if you're thinking for Key Stage 2, then yeah, I think it's more immediately, may feel more immediately connected for
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. If you're working with Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3 children and they see a young person like this whose life was ended tragically and the legacy of that for learning in British society, perhaps you'll be able to connect with that. Would you like to make a contribution?
So trying to say that it's the negative stereotypes before of how young people would be categorised.
Sure.
And that he was an aspiring young engineer in the making.
Yeah.
So that broke all stereotypes for people to wake up and know
Absolutely.
that there is a difference decided to be brown as opposed to black?
He had potential. Absolutely, yeah, I'm with you. You know, you mentioned the Macpherson inquiry, and that inquiry was aiming to sort of root out institutional racism in organisations such as schools, the police force, universities, and it's linked to race equality and the race. Not the Race Relations Act, but the Equality Act and how that feeds into education. Still, although I think Stephen Lawrence's the anniversary of his death was 25 years ago last year, wasn't it? And there's been an announcement of there being a Stephen Lawrence Day every year, which might link to education. Still, his story is not part of the national curriculum. The national curriculum was revised in 2013, yeah, and it came out in 2014. Still, his story, which could link to a notion of teaching about fundamental British values in terms of you know, him being of a minority ethnic group. When we talk about race equality and tolerance and respect, could link to those particular policies in terms of teaching and learning. But we don't see it visibly. In fact, I've not seen it visibly in my own research when it comes to examining the teaching and learning of fundamental British values. You're correct when you said that most of these characters, well, most of these icons here aren't from Britain. In fact, the only two that I put up there are Stephen Lawrence and Paul Stevenson. And it was interesting that not many of you knew about Paul Stevenson. Okay, does anybody know about Paul Stevenson?
No, I don't.
No? Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the PowerPoint, and I'll show you I'll show you what I mean by Paul Stevenson. Okay, so done the poll. The question is why the absence of a black British presence in the national curriculum for history? Why? Why are the contributions to British society and identity missing from teaching and learning, and how could these help with teaching and learning about fundamental British values? All right. When it comes to talking about the struggle for race equality, there's not much discussion about events that have happened in Britain as part of the national curriculum. But you know, if you look at, for example, the fact that it discusses Rosa Parks, okay, and the way in which she stood up to the authorities in America during the civil rights movements. Now, that is endorsed as being an aspect of the Key Stage 1 curriculum that people can talk about, whilst, you know, there have been omissions by policymakers of histories that have occurred in Britain. And Paul Stevenson's legacy is that in the 1960s in Bristol, the very same thing happened there in terms of there being a bus boycott, where he led a movement, yeah, of black people, supported by white people, to boycott the buses because of race discrimination. Okay? Why have policymakers decided to go with the American story and not the British story? Are they trying to sweep black British history underneath the carpet? Is there some sense of shame about this? You know, it just makes sense to me as an academic, as a former primary school teacher, why, yes, what happened in America is important, but this is Britain. This is what happens in Britain, and how we see our own history to shape a sense of cohesion amongst people should be at the forefront of our national curriculum. Okay, so what do these omissions by policymakers tell us about the value placed on race equality and black British history for education? They don't want to validate and empower black British people. This is my opinion, okay? They don't want to be empowered by the experiences of black British people in that respect. I mentioned her story. It's from an international context. It's offered as a non-statutory, it's non-statutory, by the way. That means teachers don't have to teach it by law in the school. It's just an opportunity to sort of talk about those events. You don't have to do it by law. You're not going to be inspected on it. But there's Paul Stevenson, and this happened at the very same time in Bristol. Similar story, boycotts. Why did policymakers not endorse that one? Okay, do not want to validate or empower black British people, do not want to be empowered by the experiences of black British people. And that movement in Bristol, as I said, it wasn't just by black British people, it was about, you know, the white people were supporting that as well. All people were supporting that form of discrimination, swept under the carpet. Because there's a white British majoritarian agenda in educational policies. And this has been argued widely over the last, 10, 12 years since Since the coalition government, came to power through David Cameron, with Michael Gove leading those educational policies, we've seen a return to a neoconservative style of education curriculum based upon traditional values from a Eurocentric perspective. Okay, the national curriculum for history, for example, is based upon a master narrative, an elitist master narrative of history, about the kings and queens, about the elites in society, okay, from a Whig perspective, okay. And it's an agenda. These are policies that stigmatise cultural diversity and difference, and it does that by othering people. Yeah, so this is Edward Said, sociologists in the room will know about Edward Said's work. This notion of seeing difference in the deficiencies or inferiorities that you construct of the other. Okay, so Western identity and culture is fundamentally forged by an othering logic, one that dehumanises or devalues black people, Asian people, Chinese people, gay people, okay, LGBT people. Okay, if you're not a specific type of person, a specific type of human being, you're going to be othered. Okay, but my focus is on black British people for this particular lecture. So that essential feature of othering is denying the other his or her own voice, marginalising them, suffocating their experiences and life histories. This is why we don't see black British history in the curriculum, being othered. It's not seen as important by those people in power. Okay, and it denies those people the opportunity to speak for themselves or to learn from their experiences about fundamental British values. Okay, yeah, we may have learned about tolerance and mutual respect back in the 8th century through that cross-cultural encounter through the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, because there was peace after that, obviously. But we can relearn that through future cross-cultural encounters, can't we? Okay, through different exemplary examples of history. But where it comes to it being people of colour, it seems as though we don't want to know about that. Their experiences don't really matter. So this is what I'm investigating through my work. Okay. So this is a dominant discourse that has helped to suffocate and to eliminate any forms of experiences of BAME people in the national curriculum in terms of black people as well, black British people. This notion that multiculturalism has failed. Was failing before, and we're going to come in and we're going to revamp the national curriculum so that we can create more social cohesion through our particular policies of neoconservatism and traditionalism. And these were the speeches of Gove in 2010, prior to the coalition party becoming the powerful party in government. And after Cameron became the Prime Minister, this was his speech in Munich. Okay, what we've got to understand is that although Cameron's not the Prime Minister now, and although Gove is not the Education Secretary now, his policies still live today. They still live today in schools. Okay, all right, they're still live in that respect. Whether it's the truth or untruth that multiculturalism has failed is debatable. That political discourse has influenced education policy in the last 20 years. Look around the room now. There's pretty much diversity in this particular room, different knowledge bases. Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, it's quite funny how a minority view of Government Cameron to say multiculturalism has failed. But when you do look around and see the dynamics of how families are now, that shows that multiculturalism has worked, because there is unity. People form relationships through love. They conceive children through love of choice.
Of course.
So this is where it shows a minority can turn everything that is positive on its head.
Yes. I agree with you. And the point is that, from my perspective as well, is that multiculturalism has been happening since, when the Romans came with their legions, they didn't just come from that part of the world that we call Italy. Now they brought people from all over the world, didn't they? Because part of the legion, So Britain's always been multicultural. It's always been culturally diverse. And you're right, where it comes to a minority group in the positions of power, they can create a discourse that becomes a regime of truth, which we'll talk about in a moment. Okay, but that particular discourse has created a whitewashing of educational policies. All right, so the promotion of fundamental British values, the prevent strategy, the history curriculum based upon a master narrative linked to Our Island Story, Henrietta Marshall's Our Island Story, written in 1905 at the height of the British Empire. Okay, which provides a celebratory, triumphant view of Britain. Okay. And its empire, being republished in 2005 and being endorsed by David Cameron, okay, and Michael Gove, okay. The national curriculum for history being structured on a master narrative linked to that particular book that eliminates all forms of diversity and presents an Anglo-centric and Eurocentric perspective of national identity, okay. Those particular positionings of neoconservatism and traditionalism, when you blend that with the current discourses of terrorism, if you want, radicalization, Islamophobia, okay, when you blend those two together, you're going to get certain policies in education that are going to be restrictive, that are going to be very Eurocentric, okay. All right, so there's been othering going on, there's been anti-immigration going on, go for it. Nativism, so that sense that that it's the right of the people who are indigenous to the country to shape policies and powers according to their own identity. One more, and neoconservatism, which I've mentioned. Yes, please.
No, it's just something you said earlier on about multiculturalism has been happening for thousands of years. If you look at the history of the UK and the invasions that have happened in the group. Is there also an element of, it's an imperialistic over time in terms of this whitewashing, in a sense that there is a recognition of multiculturalism when the others are seen to have brought something that the society sort of values and recognizes that is equal or surpasses its own, in terms of when the Romans invaded, that was kind of okay because the Romans were more advanced.
Oh, they were building the roads, so we're building the roads, weren't they?
It's a failure to recognize or have value in the cultural, what the other, so migrants, blacks, or African, bring to this society. There's a devaluing of the understanding of that. So yeah, there's that almost imperialistic that we do not recognize the multiculturalism or what you bring, because we do not value what you experience, we do not value your history.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I see what you're saying. It's an argument that could be used against it. But if you think about, say, post World War II, where Britain reached out to its empire, its empire. Well, I mean, Britain was built on its empire, wasn't it? So the value that those people brought is already here in Britain, isn't it? In terms of the roads that were built, or the buildings that were built, or the bridges that were made, comes from empire. So the value is there anyway, through where British people, in terms of colonialism, went out there and took from people. So I think that counts as that argument to some extent. But perhaps that is a perspective that the imperialists, or the neo-imperialists, if you want, do have of the other, in terms of seeing them as beneath.
I think going on that, the point of that value of what I say we brought to the country. If you go back then, England itself, Britain, was less advanced than Africa, than Asia and stuff like that. But the British went there, took the knowledge, and imposed the British stuff on those people, and then it seemed indoctrinated in the Eastern or Asian or African society that, oh, this is the right way, what the British are imposing on us. But actually they took that knowledge and went back to England and changed society.
Yeah.
So it's I see it as a thing of they won't talk about it from the angle of the black person or the Asian person. It's the angle of their leaders, what the leaders have said for it.
Yeah.
But what was actually there before?
Yeah.
We know it was because how the buildings were, they weren't built by British white person.
Yeah, so it relates very much to what we're saying about in terms of epistemic violence, where certain forms of knowledge are imposed upon the masses as a form of truth, whilst there's other pieces of knowledge that you're talking about are completely wiped away. So we have a certain sense of how the world is.
It's still happening in 2019, as you see.
Okay, all right, and there was before the current curriculum that we're working with, there was an opportunity via the QCA, the Qualifications and Curriculum Authority, to work for schools and teachers to provide a broader knowledge framework concerning the wider variety of ethnic and cultural groups in Britain. But when the coalition government came to power, they got rid of the QCA. Okay, they got rid of those quangos. They took full control of the curriculum. So that shows you what power can do. It can take away the opportunity for other smaller organisations who are working with government before to offer a broader and balanced curriculum. So that unit doesn't exist anymore. Okay, Lander calls that an erasure of.
You said that schools don't have to follow
Yeah.
those, but has there been sort of cases of schools where they've actually stuck to the original curriculum instead of taking on the new whitewashed?
Well, the whitewashed version, there are certain aspects of the curriculum that are statutory that you have to follow, okay? Yeah. And you get Ofsted will come in and they'll be asking questions about that. What I'm going to talk about later is that teachers have a certain amount of autonomy to look at the curriculum and to transform elements of that curriculum. So, it's a big word out there. Hopefully, there might be some actors, some teachers out there who might have retained that sense of ownership, and they might be teaching history through the national curriculum, but maybe through a different angle. So they might have retained some elements of the QCA in their approaches to teaching and learning. But the default position is that current national curriculum, which is statutory. And if you're a beginning teacher and you're not as confident as a teacher who's been teaching for a long time, you might just go in and just do what the book says. And it's about creating critical teachers that are able to be confident enough at the very beginning to look at the curriculum as a construct and to transform it straight away. That's what I'm interested in. All right. So Vinnie Lander talks about an erasure of diversity. Kapoor talks about whitewashing. It's been seen. But what do these discourses do? So they provide a language for talking about a way of representing knowledge, okay? About particular topics and particular historical moments in particular ways, according to Hall. Okay, and we've mentioned imperialism. We've mentioned aspects of the national curriculum that relate to particular stories, particular moments in history that of the country seen as the most important to transmit to the next generations. And although I'm not dismissing these elements of history at all, okay? I'm not dismissing them at all. They are important, but it's how they're represented. It's how they're represented, because World War I wasn't just fit. Or II wasn't just fought by people from the British Isles. What was it? It's fought by people from all over the world. So how are we going to see that as part of the curriculum? It wasn't just World War II wasn't just fought by the Spitfire that was based in Kent. Okay, it was fought by people who were people or countries around the world who were affiliated to Britain as part of the empire. So it's about representation and can assist with that of cultural hegemony, part of cultural reproduction in terms of how we see the world and how we see history from a particular angle. All right? And these are discussed by these sorts of projections of knowledge are discussed by Foucault as regimes of truth. And the school is a breeding ground for this kind of propaganda, if you want, okay? Because the sites where policy enactment and representation occur, okay, and the actor, the teacher, can either be complicit with that, okay, or they can resist that through their own autonomy, through transformative processes. And that's the kind of teacher that 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 I want to encourage to be more powerful in their practice. All right? So let's look at fundamental British value policy enactment as an example of how teachers can either be complicit with Eurocentric policies of education, or they can have the opportunity to resist it. And here's another BERA blog, British Educational Research Association blog, that's live at the moment. Okay, and this was a piece of research that we did on examining the representation of fundamental British values in schools, in primary schools. When you go to primary schools, secondary schools as well, one way in which schools are aiming to get by that particular policy, to demonstrate to Ofsted, to demonstrate to parents that they're engaging with that policy, is to put up a display board in the school to represent the fundamental British values of democracy, individual liberty, tolerance, mutual respect. To represent those, okay, and this is what's been occurring. What do you see? Shout out what you see.
Flag. British flag.
The Union flag. Shakespeare's there. White Cameron's there. The red bus.
Traditional power, powerful people.
Churchill's there.
Yeah.
He got some stick the other day about,
Monarchy. Right wing.
yeah, right wingers are up there. Okay. When I showed this to some colleagues at another conference I did, one of them said to me, "Why are UKIP flags being put up in primary schools? What the hell's going on here?" And there is a nostalgic feel to these representations of fundamental British values. I mean, to what extent do these represent mutual respect or democracy or individual liberty or tolerance? To what extent do they represent a London tourist shop? If you're foreign, you go up to London, you want to go into a tourist shop to buy a postcard or something. It represents more of London, doesn't it? So. Well, yeah, that's the other fundamental British value. Rule of law. Rule of law is the fifth one that wasn't in my head at the moment, but now you've brought it to me. Rule of law is the fifth fundamental British value, and what we discovered from our count was that either the police or the Queen was representing rule of law. What we got from see the fundamental British values that we have come through the people, through our historical experiences, through our cross-cultural encounters. We learn about tolerance, we learn about mutual respect, and that might come through violence. It might come through violence, but after violence, hopefully there's some peace, and we can reaffirm tolerance and mutual respect. Okay? I don't see any of that up there at all. You see ethnic nationalism there. You don't see a civic form of nationalism, where it comes through the people. You see ethnic nationalism, where it comes through the elites in society. You see a lot of whiteness in there as well. Okay, so we were concerned by seeing that, and this is why we had to go out. It was more of a sociological, educational piece of research. We wanted to know why schools were doing this. What were the most frequent images that were being used, and what was the impact on that on teaching and learning in schools? Okay, so yeah, we saw that this was rarefied discourses of ethnic nationalism, symbolic violence. Okay, so this comes from Bourdieu, where it talks about people in positions of power, the government, schools being able to rarefy their policies and their ideologies through visual discourses in schools. Okay, and Stuart Hall would define this as a racialised regime of representation. Okay, in relation to whiteness. Okay, that racialised discourse, which establishes privilege to white people in Britain, maintains their interests of supremacy, and is constructed to advantage white people through those particular narratives on those display boards, similar to what we've been talking about in terms of the national curriculum. It signals the production and reproduction of dominance. That's what those boards are doing. It shows the dominance. Okay, if you are a minority ethnic group child and you're seeing those expositions of power, and you're not seeing your particular face or your representation on those particular display boards, that might make you feel. I'm making an assumption now, but it might make you feel a bit inferior. Or it might make you feel that you're being watched in that respect. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to show you how the National Curriculum for History and how that particular policy via the National Curriculum and how the fundamental British values policy is shaped by a Eurocentric discourse, and how you can examine that through the lenses of white privilege and whiteness, okay? And how that power is manifested by schools as sites of cultural reproduction. So I've got another poll for you that I want you to engage with really quickly, okay? How much time have we got? Enough time, okay. All right. Got another poll that I want you to engage with, okay? Let's get this one up for you. And what one thing would you change to assist with decolonising the national curriculum? That's my question to you. I've just activated the poll. Hopefully it's going to come up. Same website, www. Is it locked? Let me unlock it. Yeah, there you go. Okay, just a short statement. You know, just think about it. What one thing would you change to assist with decolonising the national curriculum? All right. So, by decolonising the national curriculum, well, let's see what you.
Just for history or for in general?
I think keep history at the forefront, but you can go broad if you wish to. Okay, that's absolutely fine. And we'll have a discussion on that as well. Yeah, some really good ideas coming up here. I think that term decolonising the curriculum, it's a massive, big discussion point at universities, isn't it? And I think it's. Go on. Talk about where the food comes from. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's start a discussion. It's a very good way of starting discussion.
Oh yeah. You can apply sociological imagination to that, can't you? I see it as simply just sort of creating a balance between the perspectives that we share and we teach in schools. That is decolonising the curriculum. It's not dismissing the current discourses at all. It's not erasing them. It's just saying, actually, there are other ways of seeing this as well. Give them value. Give them value. That's what critical multicultural education does. Let's focus on a couple of these ones. Bell hooks. Bell hooks. Who said? Yeah. What do you mean by?
I just put bell hooks because I know she wrote some children's stories.
Yeah.
My daughter comes home with a new book every day. They've often got a moral message behind them.
Yeah.
Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I just think it's quite easy to diversify who some of the readers are.
Yeah.
A friend of mine said that his wife does that. Like in her teaching, she's very passionate about racial equality, and when she teaches, she just makes sure that some of those books are in the reading scheme. And I don't think that's a massively difficult thing to do.
Yeah. So BAME authors being accepted as part of the canon of English literature more so than they are.
She's an example of a scholar who is obviously an English literature scholar who's quite high level, challenging stuff at universities. And she's gone, well, how do I get my message out there to young people? I'll write some children's books.
Yeah.
And I probably think there's schools that aren't even aware that things like that exist.
Yeah.
That you can actually include early on.
Yeah. I can only really think of one, might be more, but when I was a teacher, I can only really think of one black author that I use, and it was Benjamin Zephaniah. I can't. No one else comes to mind.
And even
for
then,
me.
the guy with the funny accent, isn't he? Does the funny songs like that's
From Birmingham, is it?
But that's it. That's like I think that kids receive. So.
Yeah. Did you want to add to that?
Yes, I wanted to add because I have no phone at the moment. I dropped it and broke it. So my one most probably have been that it's easier now to actually embrace the national curriculum by saying, who are you? Because there is so much diversity in the classroom, the ethnic makeup, that is actually the majority.
Yeah.
I'll go back to that word majority again.
Yeah, yeah.
So even the representation within the classroom,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's there.
Yeah.
It's easy to access. It's not offending anyone.
Yeah.
100 years ago,
Yeah.
it may have been offended
Yeah.
decades ago, but it's not now because
No.
the representation of who you are denying in the classroom is sitting in front of you
Yeah.
in the classroom.
And I
So
think
it's an
yeah.
easier playing field.
access to, yeah. Is it a culturally sustainable pedagogy?
Yes.
That's what Bell Hooks talks about, doesn't she? Allowing learning to come from our own experiences or our family experiences to use that against the default position of a national curriculum.
Someone said use food, so chickpeas. Some would call it chana, some would
Yeah.
call it hummus. So therefore, it's all represented within the classroom.
Okay.
You're all speaking about the same thing,
Yeah.
but it just has a different name.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And you create a wider vocabulary, which can inform learning and which can inform future relationships with people, or current and future relationships, because you're speaking the same language, aren't you?
That's what's in food, why
Yeah.
food is now so great in Britain.
What else did we have here that we put up? Let's have a look. One more. Reinstate the study of history post 1945. We've been talking about that. I guess you talk about the value of history of communities as well. Anyone want to pick out one that they want to sort of develop, or one that they put up there themselves? Did you? No? Are you sure? Go for it. What was?
What it says about specific race issues on a regular basis, and not just Black History Month.
Where's that one?
They celebrate on diversity in October.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. So for me, I didn't write it, but I agree with
Yeah.
so that it should be embedded on a regular basis. Like
Yeah.
you said about, we're talking about World War II, for instance, but why don't we talk about the Black or Asian pilots or the Black nurses? It's always this Winston Churchill or whatever.
Yeah.
As such.
Yeah.
So in terms of just embedding it in every subject, you could embed it and make it British.
Yeah.
As well.
It is British. Yeah.
That's what.
I
Yeah.
mean, this thing actually cuts across all institutions across our society. So I'm quite passionate about this Black History Month. So I can't stand the idea that suddenly we go into a kind of spray of activities suddenly around October month.
Yeah.
Home Office do it, Ministry of Justice do it, Department of Communities and Local Government do it, and they're busy scrounging around for speakers.
Yeah.
I said, gosh, if you just do it on a regular basis, and we know we are doing this on a regular basis, the subject areas that you're dealing with, day in, day out,
Yeah.
actually rehearse all of this, but you refuse to see it and acknowledge it. And for me, that starts with an acknowledgement, and then you move forward.
Yeah.
And this has been, just my work starts from that.
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
That you have to start with this notion of, we acknowledge that we have not done this, so let's make a start. But don't just limit it to Black History Month.
Yeah.
Continue doing it, and I think that's why it's important to me, because when I studied history, I didn't grow up here, but when I studied history at school, our history curriculum was diverse enough, which taught me not just about this history, but also about my own history.
Yeah.
So, and when I came here and I saw schools, and I was quite shocked that students here couldn't even tell me, well, what's the, just regular, what's the capital city of India. I found that quite a surprise because we actually studied such a diverse curriculum. So it always struck me how this was such a bizarre part of British schools, schools in this country.
And you knew what was the capital city of England, didn't you?
Yes.
So yeah, it's about having about giving equal value to different experiences. I think the point about Black History Month is important as well, because it need that kind of movement. It needed to start somewhere. At least it was started by a Ghanaian scholar. I forget his name. It comes straight away. But yeah, we have, I think we need to move beyond it being confined to that particular month. It needs to be an all year round celebration of Black British history, but I think also of the cross-cultural encounters, the positive cross-cultural encounters between Black people, Asian people, white people, whatever. Okay, but yeah. So I think that's the way that I see Black History Month. All right, let's move on with the PowerPoint really quickly. Okay, so got some ideas from you there which were really good. Transforming approaches is to the national curriculum is one of the aims that I want to sort of cover today. And I think the challenges of the national curriculum are the statutory teaching of Eurocentric and Anglocentric viewpoints, okay? The whiteness within that, the white privilege, the institutional racism that can come from that, the unconscious bias that you can see in schools that prevent teachers from teaching outside of the box in that respect. I've experienced that when I first taught, as a beginning teacher in 1999 and 2000s, I just carried out the national curriculum because I felt that if I didn't do it, I might get told by my head teacher that I'm doing the wrong thing. But as you become more critical and as you see your autonomy, you realise that you can stand up to that threat of institutional racism and unconscious bias, and you can transform the curriculum. And there are opportunities because the national curriculum is not fully didactic. This current version isn't fully didactic. It allows for personal interpretation and the potential autonomy in enactment, but it's a case of being a brave teacher who's critical, that can not necessarily subvert the curriculum, but to reconceptualize the curriculum by bringing in different perspectives, which is going to make it for a much more of a richer experience for the children that you're working with. So this is what I did with one particular element of the national curriculum. There's a statutory aim that talks about a study of an aspect or theme in British history that extends people's chronological knowledge beyond 1066. That's a long period to work with. Okay, you're talking about just under 1,000 years for you to sort of think of a study or a theme that you can apply to national curriculum. But that time period means that there's a lot to play with. Okay, so I got quite personal with this. In terms of what could I do to extend children's knowledge of British history since 1066 to the current day. And this part of the presentation comes from a chapter that I wrote in this book by Richard Race called Advancing Multicultural Dialogues, okay? And what it does, it provides a critical examination of the teaching and learning about the narrative of mass migration, which I've spoken about earlier. In that, the national curriculum just speaks about Anglo-Saxons and Vikings and their cross-cultural encounters. And so my study was concerned by that sense of inequality of those dominant forms of multiculturalism that represent nationalism, and how some lives are written into the national curriculum and some lives are just not there at all. Okay, so this is what my study was all about. So I was looking for a particular period between now and 1066 that could aim to demonstrate critical multicultural education. Okay, so this is what I aim to do. I aim to write a reflective account of mass migration and settlement in the British Isles by considering the minority ethnic group people that I'm associated with. Now, my parents are from the Caribbean, they're from Jamaica, okay? I was born in London, okay? So I've got a lot of history in terms of how my parents came to the country and how my grandparents came to the country, and what kind of identity that I have for myself being in Britain. Okay, I consider myself to be Black British with Jamaican origins. Okay, so I consider myself a hybrid in that respect. Okay, whilst my mother, my father, they're Jamaican, they're Black Jamaican people, influenced by British culture. All right, so we're different sorts of, we see the world differently according to our experiences, but So there's incongruency and there's congruency in that respect. But still, I wanted to use those experiences of mass migration and our stories to juxtapose those against the given stories of mass migration in the national curriculum, to see to what extent the stories that I live with, that are my own, can be used to transform the current national curriculum for history, so as to advance teaching and learning, knowledge and understanding. Okay? So yeah, this is what I've just spoken about really. My parents weren't part of the Windrush generation as such. They didn't come over in 1948. In 1948, in fact, my parents were child migrants of the sort of early 60s in that respect. And my grandparents came to Britain in the late 50s. Still, their story of mass migration can be linked to stories of mass migration that have occurred before in Britain, going back to the Saxons and the Vikings, because it's all about movement from different parts of the world. It's all about cross-cultural encounters that are occurring. Okay? All right? And this is just a part. This is a part that I write in that chapter about the Jamaican culture and attitudes to life of my grandparents and parents have been passed on to me. It includes my deep sense of pride in the origins of my history. Spoken about my double consciousness in that respect, my hybrid identity. All right? So I mentioned the fact that this is in the national curriculum. What's happening here? Just a couple of words. You know, what's happening here? Pillaging. Violence. What else is happening? Invasion. Yeah. Fighting. Yeah. Yeah. It's a cross-cultural encounter, isn't it? I mean, you know, it's a depiction of Viking raiders. Call them invaders if you want. Call them migrants if you want. All right. Sorry. Terrorists, yeah. I mean, this, you know, why would you call them terrorists?
Well, we determine people from other countries come over here as doing a terrorist act in our country, but why isn't it when we went to say wherever, why isn't that terrorist act? Okay. We call it invasion.
Okay, yeah. All of these words, they're very, you know, it's rich historical inquiry, it's critical inquiry that, you know, this is what you can bring to the classroom. Okay, the very fact is that this sense of terrorism that you call it, this violence, yeah, is being taught in schools because it's statutory. Yeah, yeah. This is part of the national curriculum. But whether it's been taught as terrorism, okay, all right, whether it's been taught as violence or whether it's been taught as the creation of our national identity, yeah. Depends on the teachers, isn't it? Depends on the discourses around it. All right. Go on.
I think that's really interesting. That basically sends the messages that foreign people come here and do violent acts, invade. But then that's statutory. Like that's nuts compared to what you're talking about earlier about teaching, about harmony.
Well, I mean.
Yeah.
This is what the national curriculum says. It says to teach about the Anglo-Saxon struggle, the Anglo-Saxon and Viking struggle, and these images depict that. And we see rioting, we see fighting, we see pillage. Okay.
Exactly. And again, that reinforces the notions of the nation state.
Yeah.
Without having a mediated, fully informed discussion to tell the young minds that you're teaching that actually this can also bring a lot of harm.
It can bring a lot of harm, but it also suggests that it's okay to teach about it from this particular perspective. Yeah? Whilst I'm going to go through it really quickly. Okay. So where it comes to teaching about it from that perspective, okay, what's happening there? Riots? What else is happening there? Violence, yeah? This is an example of the uprisings, if you want, or the riots that occurred in Brixton, a cross-cultural encounter, okay? White Britain, you know, the Metropolitan Police, in opposition to Afro-Caribbean people. This isn't part of the curriculum, but what I'm trying to say is that the distant past. These are two minority ethnic groups in the cross-cultural encounter. After that cross-cultural encounter, there was peace and harmony, there was mutual respect and tolerance, a British value. Okay, this happened back in the 80s. It's not given the same value as this. Is it because why? Why do you think that might be the case? Go on.
How it's doing it from the view that the writers say was people going against what the status quo was, whereas the other way is more so like.
Wasn't there a status quo there? I mean, wasn't, you know?
Yeah, but they won't talk about that because they want to see their status quo is right, and they don't want someone who's 10 and 11 thinking their status quo is wrong. Certainly when you get older, or your parents or whoever, someone's influences you and says, actually, what they were saying isn't fully right or whatever. So that's what I think they don't. They were teaching the perspective of the animal riots from.
Some people call them riots, some people call them uprisings.
Like, my dad he was there, whatever. So he told me about it. The teacher didn't tell me about that.
No. But, you know.
Same age, so.
Yeah. Okay.
They're being persecuted there. They're persecuting there.
So it's the two forms of persecution.
Well, I think that's like almost like being a victim in a sense, like we were being invaded, and there I think the victim is sort of the other way around.
Well, I mean, these Afro-Caribbean people were invited to Britain. I mean, some Vikings were invited to Britain actually. Some Vikings were invited to Britain, but we generally believe, you know, we're generally told that they're invaders. Okay, some people in Britain might have considered the Afro-Caribbean people as being invaders as well. But these are all talking points. Yeah, it's about being able to sort of see that element of history in the past as occurring quite recently. All right, and not just placing emphasis upon that via the national curriculum. If teachers can take this particular story and juxtapose it against the given ones, then you're transforming that particular national curriculum aim, aren't you? And you're I know it's through, you know, it's for a particular, it's through mass migration and settlement, which the cross-cultural encounters, which, you know, there's violence, but violence is being taught by this already in schools. Yeah, this is a statutory aim of the national curriculum, to talk about nation building and the national identity. We can talk about nation building and national identity through this as well, because after these rights we had the Race Relations Act, which is developed into the Equality Act, which benefits everybody. So that particular occurrence there is just as important as this one, but it's not taught. It's not given value.
Do you think some of the problem with that as well is that, like you said, these instances are taught as isolated instances? So you talk about Viking invasion now. They then don't go, and this resulted to this policy or this change in society. Whereas where you've just contrasted there, people talk about uprising incidents, etc. But they don't talk about this is the change that results in it, and it's
Okay, I mean, I spoke about policy, but what if you go back to fundamental British values then, because that's something that needs to be taught in school, you could argue that this, I'm going to say, I think I might have said it already, this particular cross-cultural encounter, before harmony, there was violence, okay? Yeah. And when harmony came, there was mutual respect and tolerance. Why can't we learn the same thing there? You know, there was tension, yeah, right? Harmony was, a treaty might have been formed between these Vikings and Saxons. A policy might have been formed for these people to benefit everybody, which was related to tolerance and mutual respect. So it's about relearning those fundamental British values that occurred there in the 8th century to what happened here in the 20th century. It's about relearning them through different people's experiences, not just through one people's experiences. Yeah, that's the way you can that's the way that I see that you can transform the national curriculum and relate that to the teaching and learning of fundamental British values. Yeah. So, I mean, I just want to give you this quote on what I mean by critical multicultural education, because this is what I'm positioned with in my work, and I've suggested this already about helping students to understand concepts and issues from different ethnic and cultural perspectives, not just the dominant perspective. Okay, and here in the transformative approach, students learn the dominant narratives. It's not about dismissing the doxa, but alternative narratives as well. And it's hoped that students will be able to think critically about their current situation through those historical moments. And it changes the basic assumptions of the curriculum. Yeah? It challenges that curriculum as a construct. That's what critical multicultural education does. And as you said earlier, it can start from us. Our own experiences of cross-cultural encounters, our parents' experiences, what we bring to the classroom, and how we use that to engage with the national curriculum to transform the curriculum. Yeah? Challenging the doxa, right? So, where am I with this? So what did I do with this work? Let me just show you what I did with this work really quickly, okay? So, as part of this research, what I did, with the Brixton riots, if you want to call them, or the uprisings in 1981, I was there as well. My parents, my grandparents lived in Brixton. Okay, they're not there anymore. I've still got family who live in Brixton, but I actually remember going down to Brixton with my brother and sister the day after the riots. Okay, because I didn't actually live in Brixton. Went to visit my grandmother and my uncle and my aunts, and so what I did with my mother is we spoke about mass migration and her experiences and my experiences of mass migration, but we actually focused on that particular cross-cultural encounter. So I wrote a reflection on my experiences of it, and I got my mum to write her reflection on her experiences of it, and then we swapped our reflections and we had a discussion, okay? Just so we could aim to learn about the past, okay, to understand our present condition as being a black British person in Britain, and her current condition as being, still feeling like an immigrant in Britain, but being British Jamaican in that respect, and to sort of discuss how, or what were the possibilities of using those stories in association with the national curriculum for future teaching and learning. And my mum was quite a frank person. She's quite frank. She'll tell you it is. She'll tell you it how it is. Okay, and no, I mean this part here gives you an example of what she's like. Okay, she said that black people were standing up for themselves. Enough is enough. They were standing up against racism. And where it comes to sort of what I do with that element of her reflection there is I relate that back to the continued need to resist power and oppression through black people being enslaved by white Europeans. So, for example, my parents are from Jamaica. You speak about Paul Bogle and Sam Sharp and the slave rebellions in Jamaica. Pretty much similar to what happened in Brixton, in the 80s. Okay, that was black people standing up against the system because they felt oppressed. Okay, and so you can use the past to understand the present. Okay, this is one way of people who are oppressed speaking back to power. Okay, so that's one aspect of that cross-cultural encounter that created tension. But what develops from that is hopefully an understanding between the two groups about what mutual respect and tolerance should be like, which relates to fundamental British values. So what I did with those narratives that I had with my mum in relation to that particular moment of history was to present those narratives to a group of white British teachers, okay, to see to what extent they could use our stories in conjunction with the national curriculum to come up with transformative approaches for teaching and learning. And this is what I got from some of the teachers. You got a chance to contrast, okay? Viking raids and invasions. All of those sorts of words might be associated with riots and change and stuff. So you've got this chance to contrast. You've got a chance to use the construct, the past, with the recent present to understand more about the people in Britain, okay? To understand about their history, to understand about fundamental British values. You can make relations in that way. One of the teachers said, we're going to need to have multicultural perspectives within the curriculum, okay? If we're going to be talking about Britishness, okay? If we're going to be talking about British values, we can't just talk about it through one particular perspective, a white Eurocentric perspective. We need to be taking other people's experiences into this in order to understand what fundamental British values mean. Okay? So, what I got from testing those narratives with those teachers of white British backgrounds was that originally they were fixed with a traditional sense of the national curriculum. Okay, this is what history is, this is what I need to teach, this is me doing my job. But when you present them with alternative experiences, alternative histories, when you bring a bit of race equality into the mix, okay, they're able to reorientate their views around that particular theme. They become critical agents in their teaching, all right? They transform the curriculum. All right? This is, and it can start from our own experiences, our own family experiences, in terms of how we interpret the national curriculum. So there were 3 key points from that particular study. There was me exposing the national curriculum as a hegemonic tool in how it focuses exclusively on mass migration over the ages. But there was me using critical multicultural education as a transformative approach to practice and to pedagogy, teaching and learning about race equality. Okay, and the impacts of that in my test was seeing how training teachers of monocultural or mono-ethnic backgrounds, white British teachers, were able to sort of step outside of their sort of fixed mindsets, which might have been imposed upon them in school or from other aspects of their lives. But when they saw different life histories, they were able to make broader connections with mass migration and settlement in how and in how they taught British history. All right. So I'm going to stop there because I'm getting tired. All right. Thank you. Thank you.